Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Percy Jackson episodes 4 and 5. So I'm going to kind of just go straight into it. Full spoilers, we're just going to have a general discussion about those two episodes, and then we're going to kind of talk a little bit about what I think might happen in episode 6. So yeah, as always, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. Alright, so Percy Jackson episode 5, 4 and 5. First, let's start off talking about episode 4. So, episode 4 kind of picks up where we left off. We're continuing leaving Medusa's lair and all this stuff, and they're going on to the next part in the journey where they end up in Minnesota, I believe, where the big arch is. And essentially, this episode is very, very short. It's very straightforward. The entire episode, you can tell, is entirely constructed and designed around the set piece that happens at the arch. But I will say that it was done pretty well. But again, this show's very small budget continues to show itself. There's action sequences that happen that, like, soon as they start, they're over. It just happens very, very fast. And it's clearly because they don't have the money to continuously, draw out the action and, forever continue the CGI and that kind of stuff. But it's very, very noticeable, and it's a little disappointing because as much as I don't want to compare it to the movies because the movies just did the plot and everything so terribly wrong. But it clearly had a movie budget, and they had better action and stuff like that. So it's hard to not compare those aspects to it. But I think episode 4 overall worked out really well. We get a little bit more development between the characters. We're closer and closer to that group dynamic that I really love and remember from the books. We've kind of gotten out of that, like, annoying snark kind of not trusting each other kind of situation. We kind of get to a point where each of the characters are essentially proving themselves to each other. And after the entire incident in the train and on the bus and stuff, they basically use the arch because the change from the book here with the arch is interesting to me. They basically chose the arch in the book as something to just kind of go and see because while they're on their quest, they're also effectively sightseeing. And at this point, we've learned that Annabeth has a very, big love of architecture. She loves all things structural and architecture and those types of designs and things. So seeing the arch, she's like, come on, let's go. And so I think in the book she makes up some kind of excuse to get them to go see it, but really it's because she just loves the design of it and the way it works and everything. But in the show, we've changed it. Apparently in the show, it works as a temple because it is effectively a monument to mathematics, which is attributed to Athena, even though I believe Hermes is the god of mathematics or he's the god of a lot of things, but I think like that's basically an interesting reason to do it because it kind of ties in this idea that she loves structure, she loves structural engineering and architecture and all things generally intelligent and stuff. So it kind of works in this way where they say it kind of works as a makeshift temple. So they assume like they go in there, they'll be safe from monsters. But apparently them sending Medusa's head to Olympus was an embarrassment to Athena. So Athena revokes the protection of the arch from them so monsters are able to go into the arch instead of it being a safe place for them to kind of rest or whatever. So it's kind of an interesting thing to me because even in the original myth, Perseus sends the head of Medusa to Olympus, and Athena is very grateful for it. Like she puts the head on her shield, and it becomes Aegis and stuff. Like it becomes like a whole thing. So this idea that they send it to Olympus and then they're like upset by it, and Athena is embarrassed by it, is very interesting. It's weird. It's a kind of weird dynamic thing, but it's fairly interesting. They've clearly changed the way Athena is because of all the gods, especially the god parents and Percy Jackson. Athena was one of the ones that seemed to be a lot more chill, a lot more just affectionate, kind of nice to her kid, to Annabeth. Even though, ironically, I guess there's no other characters. We kind of get to know other characters that are children of other gods, but we don't ever get any like Annabeth siblings. It's like she's the only child of Athena. And Percy, for obvious reasons, we get the similar dynamic. But that's interesting. I never really thought that much about that. But it's interesting to me that they're giving Athena this different kind of dynamic situation that where she's like less outright nice. Because in the books, she was of the gods. She was far more affectionate to Annabeth and that kind of thing. And you get the impression that she was far more attentive to her children, her demigod children, than most of the others were. but they're kind of going in this direction that all of them are blanket statement, petty, backstabbers, and all. I mean, very, very true to Greeks, so it totally makes sense. But when they're in the arch, I love the addition of Echidna. So they start off seeing Echidna while they're being detained by the police and stuff, and she's just like this kind of generic Karen or whatever. And then they kind of realize that she's actually the one that caused the accident on the bus that caused them to be detained, because there's like glass on her shoulder, and it's just really cool because she's kind of using this thing as being the mother of monsters. She has the chimera with her that's in like a puppy dog form, and is basically, she's teaching it to hunt. That's the whole premise. So it's really, really cool addition of the characters. But in the book, of course, Echidna takes her natural monstrous form, which is one of the things that I chalk up to budget, but it's a mild disappointment because I really would have loved to see her take her true form. It would have been really, really cool to see. But just having her be this Karen type cliche was also a lot of fun. The way she very much speaks from the perspective of a mother and talks about how the other monsters and people see demigods as dangerous and that kind of thing. So they've added a lot of interesting different dynamics to it that didn't exist in the book that are fascinating. But again, I still wish we could have got her true monster form, which I really would have loved. But when we do get the final reveal of the Chimera, because we don't get it for a while, it's just teased for a bit. But when we actually get the design of the Chimera, I loved it. It's such a cool design. I love it so much. Except they could have done the snake tail. There's no real reason why they couldn't do the snake tail, even though they did the thing where it has like a poisonous barb and it like stings Percy and he becomes poisoned and has to deal with that. But they could have done the same thing with it just being a snake head and a snake biting him. They really could have done the same thing. But they incorporate the snake imagery in the Chimera when it breathes fire. Its side of its head spreads open like a cobra hood. And that's kind of an interesting design choice, even though cobras aren't common in Greece. So it's like that wouldn't be a type of, part of the original designs and stuff, the way they thought of the Chimera way back when, that wouldn't have been included. So it's like, But whatever, it's still really cool. They made it really colorful and stuff instead of this generic gray or brown like they do a lot in movies and stuff. So I thought that was really nicely done, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought the design was really, really well done and really cool. But the fight with Echidna is over before it begins, essentially. Percy convinces Grover and Annabeth to leave after he makes it seem like he's going to leave and Annabeth is going to do the sacrifice play. He manipulates her and switch places real quick and shove them towards the stairs so they'll leave, and he locks himself in the room with Echidna and stuff trying to do the sacrifice play. So those kind of things are really, really cool because I think they are also exemplifying the increase of the friendship dynamic, the improvement of their dynamic between each other. The way Percy wouldn't let either one of them sacrifice themselves for him, kind of thing. So we're getting closer and closer to that group dynamic that I love from the book so much. So I'm really, really happy about that. But when he goes to face Echidna and stuff, he barely there's no real fight. I think he tries to get one slash in, then she slaps him back, uses her apparent telekinesis to smash a hole into the floor, and for almost no real reason. And then when the Chimera is blowing fire, Percy gets pushed back and he just drops right out of the hole in the arch. So the fight is over before it begins. But one of the cool things they do, the way they shot him falling out of the arch and stuff, I thought was really well done because it's rare that something like that will happen. And I get vertigo, but I completely got vertigo because it was completely done POV. So you see him falling and stuff, and then you see the arch and it's just getting further away, and then eventually we get the spout of water coming from the river that saves him and stuff. Because in the book, Riordan had the locations kind of wrong. He has the river directly under the arch, which it doesn't, it's not directly, the arch doesn't go over the river in real life. So in the book, Percy just falls free fall directly to the water. And then the show, because the river is actually some ways over to the side, we do the water spout thing, which I think works really well. And we see the Nereid, the water spirit thing in the voice of his mother, basically telling him to breathe and reassuring him that his dad does care, and this is when he learns that he can breathe underwater. So I thought all of that was done really, really well. I liked all of that stuff. I thought it was really well done. My literal only criticism is the fact that the fights feel like they're over before they begin. And I think it's really, can only be attributed to the very small budget of the show. Even though I think the show has a larger budget than, is works as an excuse. Because I think they have something like $15 million or something. And that's like, you can make a movie for that much, but whatever. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. So, yeah, that was episode 4. I really liked it. I enjoyed it. The dynamic, it continues to improve. We're getting more of our group dynamic that I really want. We're getting some cool monsters and stuff, and, we're continuously making progress. But, again, the everything about the quest and stuff kind of feels small to me. The scope and scale of the quest and the severity of what they're doing doesn't really convey that well. They're not doing a great job in conveying that kind of idea. So let's talk about episode 5. Episode 5. All right, I don't remember if this is a 6-episode season or not, but it feels like it might be because we're kind of gearing up towards some stuff that I think they're going to put in the finale. So we get a really cool introduction to Ares this episode. I really like the guy who plays Ares. He's basically right off the page for me. He looks a lot like the way I pictured him in the book, minus the fire eyes. We haven't done the fire eyes part yet, which is a little disappointing. But before they meet Ares, we see Grover and Annabeth trying to figure out what happened to Percy. And then they're near the docks and stuff because the FBI and the police and everybody's all around the arch. And we got smoke coming from the arch because it was a whole thing. And so they just see him crawling over the boardwalk back up from out of the river or whatever. It's very coincidental that they just so happen to find him. Especially since in this episode we get a wraparound back to something we skipped in the first episode, which was the 3 fates. So instead of having Percy see the 3 fates as an omen, we have Annabeth and Grover see the 3 fates while they're looking for Percy, and they took that as a sign that Percy had died. So that's kind of an interesting way to do it, because in the books, the Percy, the 3, I can't remember if the 3 fates thing, I don't think it comes into play at all in the first book. I don't think it's an actual omen in the first book. You can call it an omen for book 5 or book 4 kind of thing, but it didn't play out. It didn't have as much to do with anything as you would have, as most people probably would have liked it to. So it's interesting that they skipped it in the beginning of the story the way they had it in the book, and they wrap it back around later on to be an indicator that Percy might not be okay, and it causes Annabeth and Grover to really worry about him. So when Annabeth sees him crawl over onto the boardwalk, she literally runs up to him and hugs him. And I thought that was awesome because it shows that a lot of her personality that we've seen so far, this standoffishness, this kind of mean, kind of acerbic nature she has, is very much a front. She's very much trying to be the tough girl and stuff, and trying to, be tough and be worthy of her mother and stuff, and just kind of deal with the borderline abuse of the neglect that the gods give them and stuff. So she's just very much trying to live up to it and everything. So it was really fun to actually see when that breaks sometimes. So seeing that vulnerability, because you could actually and I think Leah pulled it off so well. She pulled off the acting of fearing that Percy was dead, and the relief and stuff of seeing him, and then breaking that entire facade. You could see it all in her face. It was just needed no real dialogue. So I thought that was just really, really well done. And even with Percy, I can't remember the actor's name. He's doing a really, really good job as well. You can see I love the fact that he has so much continuity in the things that he say and does. It's very much last episode we were talking about we're kind of friends now. And now we're seeing it play. So it's very much things that were said before aren't just dismissed for new dynamic creations later. It's all, continuous. And I just really like that. I think it's been done really, really well. And she called him Seaweed Brain. Oh my God, Annabeth finally called him Seaweed Brain. And it is so funny because if you watch my reactions, of course, on Patreon, my reaction, it took me a second before I realized it. I had a delayed reaction. I'm just sitting there enjoying all the other stuff. And then she called him, it was in the sequence of things, and she called him Seaweed Brain. And I'm like, oh, she got it took me a second, it was a total delayed reaction. But I am so happy. That's one of my favorite things. I love that part of their dynamic, and we're starting to actually get that in episode 5. we started in episode 4 to build towards the dynamic that I love from the books, but in episode 5 we kind of have established it. It seems like we get the seaweed brain comment. We're starting to get that affectionate yet very sarcastic kind of banter back and forth between Annabeth and Percy, which is very much a relationship dynamic that they have and is very central to their dynamic. So I love the fact that we're starting to get that. We're starting to see where it builds from. We're starting to see the motivation of it and stuff. And I think that's really, really cool. So what's interesting though to me in the books, Grover is mostly just kind of like Grover is just kind of comedic relief / he's like an assistant to Percy and Annabeth. And here though, we're really leaning into the fact that he's like 24 and he's technically more mature than they are, even though the way they age, he wouldn't really be much more mature than a 12-year-old. But we have this interesting dynamic of when Percy and Annabeth go to try to find Ares' shield. Grover is left at the diner with Ares, and he's basically sitting there like using flattery and stuff like that in order to try to get information out of him, trying to learn anything he can about what's going on from the god's perspective and stuff. So it's really, really cool. It's a really cool scene. I love how he plays into all these kind of cliches and things, and I love how he just immediately is able to convince him that like he's a fan of his because he likes all these obscure wars and he thinks like they're kind of interesting and stuff. And I really think that's just Grover being learned, knowing about various battles and stuff and knowing exactly which buttons to push with Ares, because one of my favorite depictions of Ares is Ares as like a bully, as like a petty bully who is vain and who just like loves to basically be an a-hole. Like I just love that interpretation of Ares because it's very much how I've always seen him. So I love that we kind of have that in here, but it's also like he comes by it so naturally that he doesn't do it maliciously at all. It's just kind of, who he is, the pettiness and the vindictiveness and kind of the violence. Like, but he also is depicted as having like a true temper. So all these different little dynamics and nuances about Ares as a character, as a figure in history and stuff like that, all those things that I really like, I'm so happy to see them present in the show. It's so cool. And it's interesting. We get almost exactly the interaction we get from the book. It's really, really nice. He shows up, he feeds them, even though they don't eat the burgers or the fries or anything. And that's like, holy crap, that sucked. Because that stuff looked pretty good. But they and he basically sends them on the side mission to go find his shield, and then he's like, I'll help you out, you send me, get the shield or whatever. And like that's exactly what plays out. We even get the tunnel of love thing that happened in the book, except it plays out a little differently. So instead of leaning into the comedy of it the way Riordan did in the book, where Annabeth and Percy basically gets tied up and they get broadcast on Olympus TV in order to get made fun of because the trap is set for Ares and Aphrodite, who is constantly cheating and cheating on Hephaestus and banging Ares. So he wanted to like humiliate them and embarrass them. So instead of doing that, which would have been a very funny scene and very comical, we have this situation of Hephaestus creates a device or whatever that basically freezes you in gold, basically, and like forces the person to stay there forever like a statue, I guess. That's the implication. It's supposed to be something strong enough to contain a god like, Ares or Aphrodite or whatever, I guess. Even though I don't think, leaving them there forever would be allowed by the other gods, but whatever. So instead of having it be something that's just comical that plays out, they create this scenario where it's like a very dangerous situation. And we get to see the way in which Aphrodite, the way in which Annabeth and Percy's relationship has progressed to the point where he clearly is affectionate for her and she's affectionate for him and she doesn't want anything to happen to him and stuff like that. So like we get this almost tear-filled scene of like him basically saying, I have to sacrifice myself. You're better than me. You're better at all this stuff. You're going to go ahead and finish the quest and stuff. Like, you're awesome and everything. And like she basically like lets all the stuff kind of fall apart because all of her glory or death, victory or death kind of mentality comes from the borderline abusive nature of the way the gods treat them. So it's very much a do something for me and I'll acknowledge you kind of a thing. So she's kind of realizing like that dynamic has, she's learned negative things from that. She's kind of like recognizing Percy's not like that and appreciates that. And she kind of wants to be more like that. So we're taking different dynamics and things that help them bond in the books, and we're changing those things to more, I would call them deeper things. They're more emotionally resonant things than the things that help them bond in the book. So that's a very fascinating decision in my opinion. I really like the way it plays out. And so now we're kind of reaching this point of having the exact character dynamic that I love and that I really wanted to see. And I'm really, really happy about it because they're so much fun together. And this making Grover a little bit more manipulative, a little smarter, a little bit more world wise. That kind of change to him, I think, works really well as well because it makes him feel a little bit more on equal footing. Because in the book, to me, he gave off very little brother energy, despite being technically older. So I like that he has more to do, and he's more of a dynamic part of their little trio. So I thought that was just a lot of fun. I liked all of it. I think this is definitely the best episode by far. Episode 5 is my favorite episode of the season. It has the best stuff in it so far. They didn't have direct action like a fighting scene or big CGI thing. They had a different type of action with the whole trap and Hephaestus and everything. So that dynamic, because it's not very CGI heavy and it's not dramatic or any, it's not like hyper expensive shots to film. Essentially, they're able to actually sit with it and let the pacing play out a little better. So I think a lot of those things worked out really, really well for this episode. Good pacing, good acting, great actors, well written, just so much fun. I enjoyed it a lot. Episode 5 is definitely my favorite. Maybe episode 6 will top it. We'll have to find out next week. So yeah, that'll do it for this week, everyone. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of this episode or episode 4? Do you think we're actually getting up to the character dynamics from the books and stuff? Let me know about that in the comments down below. And as always, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and if you're interested in my reactions to these episodes, make sure you check out the Patreon. The link is in the description below. So, as always, I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.